Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another of our Wednesday webinar, also known as Webinar Wednesday, hosted by CSU Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. Good afternoon. I'm Kelly Bearden. I'm the director of the center, headquartered in downtown Bakersfield, and we're back again for our Managing Your Small Business Through the Pandemic webinar series. This is number 19. We've been going since March 18th on whatever is current and topical having to do with managing your business through the pandemic. So thank you for joining us today, and let's get going a little bit. Got a lot to go over today. So as you probably are well aware of by now, that we are part of America's SBDCs, Small Business Development Centers around the country. And what we do is we specialize in consulting and training. In all 50 states. In California, we have actually 6 different regional offices that were part of the Central California region. As you see, we located in Kern County in the south, go all the way up through Inyo and Mono and cover the Eastern Sierra. And we also, throughout the Central California region, have 5 other centers that are located in Clovis, in Merced, Modesto, Salinas, serving Monterey County, and in San Luis Obispo. So contact your local center if you have any questions, you need any assistance, you need some training, you need some capital, whatever you might have a need for. So Webinar Wednesday, as you know, is sponsored by a number of entities that help us bring webinars to you since 2013. There's a good list of those that are participating. And let's get into what's happening today, July 22nd. So the big thing going on right now is the next stimulus package and trying to find who are going to be the winners and losers in the next stimulus. And we're going to get into that pretty detailed this afternoon. We'll talk briefly about the forgiveness aspect and kind of give you an update and see how the two tie together, what ties PPP forgiveness and the negotiations going on with the next stimulus program. We're talking about what's going on with Kern Recovers, the PPP program. We'll give you an EIDL update, talk about those programs, what's going on. We'll take your questions at the end and a poll. So let's go right to the poll right now. So a poll question you haven't seen before for those of you that have attended the webinar before. Here's a poll question, and it's going to deal with the next stimulus program. So the question is going to be on what do you want to see or what do you hope to see in the next stimulus? So again, what do I hope to see in the next round of stimulus? Maybe stimulus check for individuals and families. Another round of PPP for hard-hit businesses. Also extending the unemployment benefits, the $600 that's added to the federal. There's a limited protection for reopening businesses that's on the table, and also payroll cuts for employees and employers. Okay, well, getting some voting in right now, and up to about 45% of you, and the leader right now is another round of PPP for hard-hit businesses. Then we're also seeing other things for liability protection, strong. The stimulus checks, popular. Payroll cuts, pretty good. Yeah, it's popular as well. Not so much the extending the $600 per week. Sorry about those of you that are self-employed and being able to draw it now, but let's go up to, we got 64% of you had voted. We're going to end this poll and we'll share the results with you. And as you can see, 28% would like another round of PPP for hard-hit businesses, something that is going to be negotiated. So 28% of you, 24% are interested in that stimulus check for individuals and also for family. And we'll see how that shakes loose. The next round is also, for liability protection for opening, which is basically liability insurance from the coronavirus for employees and customers if you open your business, and also payroll tax cuts for employees and employers. And then only 7% of you looking to extend the PUA benefits. So thank you for participating in that poll. We have one more for you. And this poll question is going to be a little different. We're going to actually allow you to choose more than one answer here. And since many of you are spending through your PPP funds and we're concerned about a cash crunch coming, we're going to launch this next poll, and it's going to be, since the crisis, I have negotiated reduced payments or deferments for the following. Potentially a loan payment. If you have an SBA loan, you automatically got one. Rent or lease, supplier payments or terms, maybe utilities or some of the other expenses. And then the last is I have not asked or received any type of deferral. So getting up there, 40% of you have voted. And we have an overwhelming winner coming in right now, as we just hit 60%. I'm going to give you another few seconds. Most of you have not asked or received any deferral at all. Coming in loud and clear, very strong. So vast majority, as a matter of fact. So we're going to end the poll right now. We have 65% of you that have voted, and share the results with you. And what you see right there, 63% have not asked or received a deferral of any kind, way, shape, or form. 19% is in second place, and it's tied between loan payments. And again, you get an automatic SBA deferral if you have an SBA loan as part of the CARES Act. And also 19% of you have received some type of rent or lease concessions, either a deferral or some type of concessions. 6% of you have other expenses and utilities that you've been able to get some type of relief from, and 5% for supplier payments and terms. Okay, good to know. Good to know. Okay, we'll stop sharing that. And we'll get rid of our polls for this particular week and introduce our guest speaker. And our special guest today is Jay Thompson. Jay's been with the SBDC in Bakersfield longer than I am. I've been there 8 years. You see a little bit about Jay's bio right here. I do like I usually do. I'll talk about the things about Jay that I admire and like, in addition to all those. Of course, I love the fact that Jay is a consultant with the SBDC, and he was in the auto industry for about 18 years. And a very proud fact that he has, that he should be very proud of, is that he met a payroll every week for 18 years. Sold that business back in the mid-2000s, and since then has been with the SBDC since we opened up at CSU Bakersfield in October of 2010. One of Jay's great strengths is in the financial and in getting particular capital, finding capital for his clients has been an overwhelming strength of his, not only in our region, our 3 counties, but throughout the entire Central California region. I believe Jay is approaching somewhere near $100 million in those 10 years of getting capital. He has worked with literally hundreds of clients during the crisis since March 18th. And has found many idle and actual PPP loans. Jay, thank you for joining us today, and welcome.
Well, hello, Kelly. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Well, it's great having you and great getting your expertise, and really expect to have some good feedback back and forth. A little of the ham and egg variety today. I don't know which you would prefer to be, but what we'll do is we'll deal through a lot of the stimulus and a lot of the other things and get some perspective from somebody out in the field who's worked with hundreds of small business clients through the crisis. So it's great to have you aboard, and let's get rolling on the stimulus. And a popular choice in our last poll was a second PPP for hard hit industries. And we had Secretary Mnuchin come out and say that Congress is considering the hardest hits, or they should consider, with the negotiations going on now, should include restaurants, bars, the hospitality industry, lodging and travel and events, and also a lot of your smaller businesses that deal with salons, and be it nail or hair and others. So that would be something that would be good, and also potentially something that actually is 100 employees, or even potentially less than 100. It would be the maximum. So very limited is what he would like to see. And Jay, do you see a need out there for our clients to for a second round of PPP for hard hit industries?
Yes, there's a dramatic need. As serious as this pandemic is, shutting down the economy has just decimated our small businesses that we deal with, and a lot of them are troopers. I mean, the winners will find a way, but it's been really tough. And so any assistance that can come their way would be greatly appreciated.
So along that same vein, Secretary Mnuchin thinks that adding more funding would be a good choice. Having restrictions on companies that are eligible, allowing the companies that are struggling in specific industries. And we even think this might come down to a NACE code when we start thinking about what industries could actually be opened. It could actually go with the classification code of your particular industry that you fall into on who might receive a second PPP check. And then also, what financial considerations? There's been some things that have been levied saying that not only do you need to be in a hard hit industry, but what we need to see also is we need to see that you are actually losing revenue and have shown a revenue loss. Some interesting things that have come out recently, some stats and showing where hard hit restaurants and other industries are and where their revenue level is. For example, across the United States, you won't find a bar. Well, you could probably find some, but as an aggregate that are for an entire industry, they're under the 50% as far as revenue.
Right. So some of our restaurant clients, I mean, they're at 80% just to break even. And when they get shut down, it's just a drain. Money always takes the path of least resistance. And when you don't have cash flow coming in, it sure goes out fast in a hurry.
And you really see the dine-in as the ones that are most dramatically affected and the ones that are closing around the country. And not only around the country, but also in our particular region. You're seeing the dine-ins, and a lot of the people that had dine-outs and drive-through windows are continuing to do okay. Maybe not do great, but to do okay. So it's going to be interesting to see if we do have a second PPP, what it comes down to as far as category, placing categories on revenue, lost revenue, industries, etc. So that's one thing to keep your eye out for through the negotiations, and they're going to potentially be going on. So what is the next round of stimulus? There's no guarantee that we'll get a deal, but it seems like both parties are interested in negotiating something that really needs to be done. It seems like it could be the last stimulus, as some of them have reported. So that could also hamper the negotiations as we move forward. Many people don't even anticipate a deal being done before August 7th. And August 7th is the date that is the Friday that Congress recesses for the rest of the month. So this could be a protracted negotiation over the next few weeks. We definitely have some differences between the parties and what they would like to see, especially since it could be viewed as the last stimulus. Oh, pop quiz, Jay. August 7th could be when this deal gets done. What happens on August 8th?
August 8th is the last day for the PPP.
Last day to file for PPP. Thought I might be able to slide that past him, but not today. So what we're seeing is two different packages come from both parties. We've seen basically a $3.5 trillion package that was passed by the House Democrats maybe 6-8 weeks ago. And we've heard from Senate Republicans say that maybe the deal should be smaller, maybe around $1 trillion, given the fact that we've already had 3 stimuluses. And the CARES Act was a $2.2 trillion program. So you'll see there's aisle priorities. So the Democratic side of the Congress is looking potentially to do something with the HEROES Act, at least use that for a basis, a starting point for negotiations. Didn't really get much traction going through the Senate, so the 3.5 is something that contained a lot of funds for state and local governments, for example, the $1 trillion. And this is an area that is going to be divided, whereas the Democrats think that the $1 trillion for state and local governments is essential given the fact of what's going on in the coronavirus effect. They also believe in $1 trillion for families, including the stimulus check, and also extending the federal insurance premium. Boy, that's a tongue twister all of a sudden. Extending federal unemployment insurance premium. So, and the premium is that $600 that's paid on addition to the state unemployment that individuals also receive. They're also looking at providing rental assistance and providing, as part of maybe that $1 trillion, in hazard pay for frontline employees, looking also at investments in communities of color that have been ravaged by the virus, and also more funding for testing. So that's kind of the beginning point in the negotiations where we are now from the Democratic side. On the other side of the aisle, the sticking point are going to be liability protection for businesses that are reopening. And it's starting to show what that liability protection might look like, which might be a 5-year exemption on lawsuits being able to be filed by potentially employees or customers for claiming they contracted coronavirus in their particular business. So really, the Senate Republicans, that's a big, huge issue. The executive office is looking at payroll tax for employees and employers, of which they would actually benefit people that are working, where they wouldn't have to have any withholding from the federal side of things for federal income tax or Social Security or Medicare. And also the employer side of that, so there would be nothing going into Social Security and other programs. The Senate has also talked about potentially new tax credits. And with the new tax credits, looking at some of the things that could happen there. The Senate's Republicans, and maybe the House Republicans as well, are looking at potentially a lower income level on the stimulus checks. So right now, if you recall, the last stimulus check had a limit of $75,000 for individuals, and I believe it was double that for people who filed a joint tax return. So it could be a lower amount that's actually negotiated, where actually less individuals will actually receive the stimulus check. The number thrown around as the beginning part of negotiations, I believe, is around 40,000. So 40, 75,000, it's going to probably fall in there somewhere. A lesser amount for extending the federal unemployment insurance, rather than the Senate Republicans are saying that right now not enough individuals are motivated to go back to work because they're making more money on unemployment than they are actually by working. So there could be something, I think, that came out yesterday, kind of some of the early discussions behind the scenes were basing the federal unemployment insurance premium on a percentage of what that individual earns. So maybe it's 60% of their paycheck, maybe it's 80%, but use that as an incentive to provide them to return to work and make more money than they can by drawing both state and federal unemployment. And of course, the possible second PPP, which we've already talked to. So Jay, after looking at both sides of things, the great thing about what we can do now and what we've been able to do through this webinar the last 19 weeks is to speculate, is to sit here and to guess and assume and maybe see. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of give and takes between two very wide positions on the next round of stimulus. So now I get to get your guesses and your estimates on what could possibly happen.
Well, what I'd like to see happen is the tax cuts, because that will help employers keep people employed, and that keeps everything moving. So in my mind, that's the best way to go. But it's up for people smarter than me to figure out what's the best way to do that.
And they will tell us once they figure it out. So interesting negotiations coming. There is common ground between the two sides that we saw. I think that there is some support on the liability issues from members of both parties. It was kind of evidenced by a bipartisan letter that was signed by, I believe, 10 representatives, half on each side of the aisle, that supported the liability issues. The stimulus check, I think we have something coming up in November that makes that a real popular item, and plus keeping money in the hands of individuals and consumers will only help businesses and others. And also the income limit on that is going to be something that's going to be heavily negotiated, as we mentioned, as far as also extending unemployment. So what do businesses want to see? Well, corporations have come out and they said, hey, we want somewhere in stimulus to be able to cash out of our tax credits. So we're not seeing a lot of probably support for that, but with the tax changes in 2017, a lot of corporations came up with tax credits, and they figured that they would be able to offset those credits against earnings. And right now, there's, a lot of corporations and businesses aren't going to be seeing earnings in 2020. So maybe a way for them to cash out. Corporations benefited somewhat also in the CARES Act through, and when we're talking about corporations, generally talking about larger multinational corporations that are publicly traded. So we also saw the airlines that were represented with the CARES Act, and we had, I believe, 4 or 5 airlines that took the government's offer of billions of dollars of assistance in order to give up some of the equity for their particular airline in order to assist it through the crisis. So businesses and corporations looking for tax credits. The auto industry is much stronger this year, or this crisis, than the last, so not looking at a lot there. Trade associations. We're hearing from a lot of trade associations, the National Restaurant Association among them, that are lobbying for their own individual industry interest, and they continue to do that. Or hospitality industry and those that are hard hit, they are really out there lobbying big time. And of course, then there's the stock market, and the stock market apparently just wants stimulus to keep the rally going. So you see anything in there, Jay, that stands out or deserves an extra mention?
I think you got it covered. Again, I like those tax credits.
Okay, so that's what we have on stimulus. And there'll be more coming on next week, and so keep posted, and once there's a new stimulus package, we'll dissect it and figure out how our small businesses can benefit. So the latest on PPP forgiveness. Not much going on there. One of them is tied to potentially a stimulus item that we didn't just mention. But last Friday, SBA Administrator Jovita Carranza had mentioned that the online portals that lenders will use for the forgiveness applications is expected sometime, hopefully by August, but potentially sometime in August. And so that tells us that I know that there's a lot of you out there that want to proceed on and get your PPP applications, your forgiveness applications off your books and get it taken care of and wrapped up, and expect August before that's going to be the first chance of doing that. So that's something. Banks aren't going to be able to accept your applications until at least August. Now, this could be a moot point, and actually, Secretary Mnuchin mentioned that potentially there's forgiveness for all loans, all PPP loans under $150,000. and that the executive office would back such a proposal. The banks are strongly supporting this. Remember when we looked at the PPP numbers in the past, 85% of those nearly 5 million PPP loans were 150 and under, and would actually bring a lot of relief and a lot of speculation and ways to combat a lot of the things for forgiveness. But potentially that's on the table also. And since it's money already spent, it's not new dollars that are being created. So that's something to keep watching for the stimulus as well.
Yeah, I might add too, don't hesitate to reach out to the SBDC. We're happy to help you with your PPP forgiveness application. We can start working on that now if you're ready, and be prepared. And again, it's no cost to you to do that.
And I know you're sitting there saying, well, hopefully I won't have to make that call and I can make that SBDC call for another reason. And here's 3 good reasons right here and 1 bad one on why a blanket forgiveness of 150,000 makes sense. The information that's been submitted will show that the lender has 60 days after you submit your application in order to do their review. And they could ask for additional information, require some more documentation, and they can forgive in whole or in part that particular loan. Then it goes to the SBA, and the SBA has 90 days to conduct a review. So potentially from the date of your submission, you could be out 5 months before you know where exactly you're going to be. It can either approve the forgiveness, ask for more info, or approve a portion, or the whole thing. So right there, we have the lender, we have the SBA, we have 5 months. And also, the amount forgiven can be actually done over 5 years at 1%. For those that actually have, the pre-June 5th, you are going to have to negotiate the terms with your lender. So if you have a PPP before June 5th, which we found out the majority of you out there do, that it's going to come down to, if there's a portion that needs to be forgiven, it's going to have to be negotiated with the 5-year term with the lender. So that opens up another can of worms. So if it's automatically forgiven, we kind of lose those 3 aspects of what is a very bureaucratic and timely process. Now, the one fly in the ointment, of course, is that for those of you that received a PPP, and last week we mentioned that the EIDL Advance program had ended, but the EIDL Advance could be the one problem and why maybe the bad reason on why this doesn't happen. So you recall with your EIDL Advance that you actually, it is not forgiven. So something would have to be done with that portion, either added to an EIDL that you have or forgiven entirely. So it's kind of remains in flux on what could happen. Because remember, your EIDL Advance actually shows up on your PPP forgiveness application and is not forgiven. And that could be up to $10,000. So of that $20 billion, much of it is intended to be a grant for those that did not qualify for one reason or another for maybe a full EIDL. And so that's potentially an issue. See anything there, Jay?
You got that covered.
Man. So also, to increase the likelihood of getting it forgiven if there isn't a blanket forgiveness exemption provided, we'd really like you to keep those funds separate if you can. If you haven't been able to do that, is to keep detailed records, and really kind of your payroll information is going to be very important. And those supportive documents very well might come from a third-party vendor who does your payroll for you, but also keeping aside and easily being able to explain to your lender and then subsequently the SBA if needed, your payments for interest, rent, utilities, and so forth. So also a little bit on that, on the EIDL aspect of it. So on the idle part of it as well. Okay, let's move on to Kern Recovers, idle and PPP update. And with the Kern Recovers loan program, it appears to be ending. As of yesterday, there was only $90,000 left in it. The average size has moved up a little bit to about 29,000. And so you're starting to see a lot of differences between the Kern Recovers program and the PPP in general. And one of the things that really jumped out to me was that with a loan size, the average being 29,000 compared to being about 105,000 for the PPP, you're seeing a lot more smaller borrowers get in. And it could be skewed by the larger, because the PPP could go up to $10 million. So it could be skewed by some of the larger ones, but really limiting the size to 75,000 and also an average size of 29 kind of brought it out to a lot of different businesses and industries that we saw.
And I only had a handful of clients that applied for the Kern Recovers because most of them had already gotten the EIDL or the PPP loan. But boy, hats off to our county leaders here who put that together and the lenders that are handling that, because they just did a great job on helping people with that money.
So Jay, you mentioned PPP and EIDL, and you had a lot of clients. How many clients do you think that you worked with that received PPP or EIDL?
Over 300. I helped with 300 applications and our clients, and about $8.5 million worth of that PPP and EIDL money. So it was quite an endeavor there for a period of time. It's calmed down now, but in the beginning, it was all hands on deck making things happen.
And you're still working with EIDL or PPP and EIDL clients to this day?
Yes, and the thing is, as of late, the EIDL loans are going through rather quickly. We're applying and having funds deposited in the bank account in about a week. But I still have a few clients from April when we had applied that still haven't received anything. And what we found is there are several reasons for that. Some people have said that the SBA never reached out to me. Well, the SBA has done a great job with this EIDL program, believe me. The SBA's function is as administrators. They're not typically lenders. And they put this program together and they've just made it work like hats off to them. I mean, they've done a bang up job making this thing happen. But what I found is that when we contact them to follow up on these loans, one is if you call them, you get through rather quickly. Somebody answers in a couple of minutes and they can bring up your account and tell you what's wrong. And quite often there's just a few simple reasons why there was no response. And one is maybe you had inadvertently put in the wrong email. I had 3 or 4 clients that had done that. They had, when they put their email in, they had crossed a digit or something to that effect. Another reason that people didn't receive anything was their business couldn't be located on public records. A big deal too was a lot of people have their credit reports frozen. And so as like on any loan, they're going to check you out and do a background check, which includes a credit report. And if your credit is frozen, they won't have access to do that. FICO score, there was a minimum FICO score. Didn't have much problem with that, but there was a couple of those that were below that level. Another thing was applicant wasn't a U.S. citizen was an issue, or bank account status couldn't be verified. One of the issues that we had was several clients in the past year or even more recently had changed their entity from a sole proprietorship to a corporation or LLC. Well, they just didn't have tax records or anything yet. So again, it's easy to remedy that situation by contacting the SBA and talking to them. But if you were a sole proprietor last year and then you converted to a corporation, say for 2020, and you applied for the funding as a corporation, they have no history of you in the system. And another big deal is ownership verification, that you are the owner of the business. So those issues are easily corrected. You can reapply. You can have your application reconsidered if denied. And I'd encourage you again to reach out to us. We're happy to help you with that. And I had several denials that we had them reconsidered, and they went right through. It was just some information they needed to make the decision to go ahead and fund the loan.
Yeah, and if you haven't applied, there's still time. EIDL is open until December 31st. And I had an interesting case this week with a client that actually filed right after the portal reopened again on June 15th, and received an email from SBA a couple days later. But the email went into his junk or his clutter folder and he didn't see it. And then he was contacted, by SBA saying, it's been 30 days since we contacted you. We're going to close your file if you don't want this EIDL. And so we frantically got on the phone and got right through. The 800 number for SBA disaster loans is open 7 days a week. And you can jump in there and resolve a lot of things. And the demand for the actual call center is down. So got in, was able to get some clarification, and was able to set up the portal in a little bit of time, and actually received loan approval a day or two later. So
I had a similar situation where a client said, "Hey, I haven't heard anything," and I'm like, "Well, let's call." So we got on the phone, called them. Same situation. The SBA had sent the email, and it ended up in the client's junk folder. So we had them. They resent the email within 5 minutes. It was there. We completed the process. 2 days later, boom, $150,000 in their bank account.
And really, it holds true with all programs, the PPP, the Kern Recovers, EIDL. If you've applied and you haven't heard anything, you need to get on the phone and you need to try to contact somebody and find out exactly what's going on. So
Right.
a lot of people saying, well, gee, I guess I didn't get it, so I should apply somewhere else. But you should continue to look back at those other ones until you get, an answer that is good.
Right. And make sure you have your application number handy, because that is your key to success on this.
And also, if you're interested in an EIDL reconsideration, we had one, Jay, where they just didn't check the box that they were a U.S. citizen. Correct. And so that kicked it out. So it can be a lot of things that are really minor, but if you have issues or questions, you want a specific question you want answered, tomorrow at 11 a.m. at the Fresno District Office of the SBA, they're doing another one of their EIDL reconsiderations. And they generally bring in Corey Williams from the Citrus Heights, California Disaster Loan Office, and bring him in, and along with the very capable and competent Fresno SBA District Office leadership, they go through and give you some really good input and answers to really get that resolved. So, we've mentioned all along the EIDL is really, and people are starting to really see that if they can actually access that, is really kind of the longer term solution, as this crisis looks like it could go on for a year. And it's really the EIDL loan, 3.75% over 30 years. That's really going to make the difference in a lot of businesses being able to stick around and survive. So big vote of appeal, big vote of confidence here in the EIDL program. Jay mentioned the PPP is open until the 8th, and it's still showing demand. I skipped over the Kern Recovers PPE program. And the PPE program is a free program, as many of you know, and it's still available. You can go to the County of Kern's website. If you type in Kern Recovers, then generally you can go to the county website and get the form, fill out the form for the PPE. Personal protection equipment is extremely helpful. Jay told me something that I think I already knew, and that is Kern is getting ready to go back on the watch list, potentially I think on Saturday. And so with more cases, and so the PPE is just going to be more important in using it in your particular businesses and having your customers and your employees and in public do that as much as possible. So if you can't find PPE, you don't want to pay for it, the county's here to try to help you.
Hey, Kelly, I might add one thing on the EIDL. It's capped at 150,000 now, but it's based on your 2019 revenue minus cost of goods sold. So if you had a lesser amount and you qualify, we can certainly apply for an increase on that. And we've had a couple of clients do that. When they received their initial offer, it was the 150,000, and they said, "Well, I don't need all that much. Maybe 80,000 is okay." Well, several weeks later, they should have taken the whole amount. So we've reapplied, and they will increase that amount. So something to keep.
Yeah, and we did see a lot of those, and I know you did too, Jay, where people either took a lesser amount or they said, after all, I don't know if I need the EIDL. And the important thing to remember is if you turn it down and say you don't need it, because it is a program that is based on need, and you're basically, by taking idle funds, saying that you need that money for working capital in your business. And if you turn it down, oftentimes you cannot go back and apply again or get the money again. So it's important that you really kind of look at the long picture, and we encourage people to take it because, number one, there's a deferral of 1 year before you make a payment. And usually it's only, the loan fees are only $100. And that's if your idle's over 20,000, where they will actually, the SBA will go in and do a UCC1 filing, a kind of a blanket certificate for assets for collateral. And they go in a subordinated position if you have other creditors that are in place ahead of them. So important things on idle and considerations and things like that. So one thing, and we're going to take your questions in just a few minutes. So, but as we're continuing to kind of work through this particular crisis, it's been a while since we've come back and talked about these issues that we talked about early on as we got into PPP idle and other issues. So, but really, things to look at again is to look at renegotiating rents, leases, and your terms. What we see is a lot of landlords who know about the PPP program. They know that there's funds available for them in that, and the PPP is running out. So if you have a landlord who wouldn't negotiate with you so much at the beginning, if you're going to be in a predicament for a longer period of time and they value you as a tenant, then they are probably more likely to come back now and potentially negotiate. So, with PPP funds running out for many businesses, now might be the time to reconsider some of the deferrals or some of the renegotiations. Maximize resources and save cash. It's really something that there's a lot of resources that are out there, and to really save the cash, businesses need to continue to be creative and opportunistic and open to options and suggestions. One thing we hope to talk about in a few weeks is the new federal bankruptcy law, which timely came out in February of 2020, was passed into law last year, and offers a lot more flexibility for small businesses wanting to actually try to save their company by going into bankruptcy. Now, being open to all options and suggestions is looking at that potential resource, and we'll discuss that in August sometime. And also calculate your cash flow under a worst case scenario. We see a lot of individuals that are actually doing cash flow analysis for the first time, but looking at the cash flow from a worst case scenario, looking at this particular form that is available from the SBDC, and you could work with any of our consultants or not any of them. Our marketing people, not up on financial stuff as much as some of our financial experts. So, but really there's assistance that's available, and some of our student associate consultants can work with you on trying to come up with the cash position and to demonstrate. And really one of the best uses, Jay, I saw out of this was somebody actually did a cash flow forecast, took it to their landlord and said, how am I going to pay you rent and stay in business at the same time? And demonstrated a need to where under that cash flow with some really good underlying assumptions that came out of it, made it believable to the landlord, and actually didn't only do a deferral, but did a rent concession for a number of months. So it can be used for many things. One of them is to protect you and to show you when your cash position is going to be at weaker periods. Something we talked about early on in the 19 weeks that we're at now, but something we haven't addressed in a while. But it really, the cash flow forecast and really cash and customers are going to be a common theme that we talk about starting in probably August because of the need for both of those. So, conservatively doing that and doing the monthly issues and understanding it might change frequently. One of the things that we're seeing a lot with businesses is that the cash aspects might change dramatically and frequently. So let's talk a little bit about the direction. And really, I'm really kind of reaching out to you now who have been around and who have been on the webinars. And when we come down to, with August coming on the horizon, and what do you want to see coming up? What do you want to see in your webinar? So please use the survey today and give us some ideas and some of the things that could be on negotiations. We could be talking about the bankruptcy reorganization. There's some marketing tools for cash and customers and some of the other things with reopening strategies. We have some good things planned. We want to know what you want because we are customer driven. So use your search box, and we're going to continue to do PPP and EIDL updates every webinar until those are put to bed. But starting in August, we're starting to see some changes with a little less of the dependence on the forgiveness application and really maybe managing EIDL a little better, along with other things and some of the tools that are out there for your business. So your input is valued. We really want to see it. A little point of note before we get into questions right now is they are giving me a week off next week. Don't think I'm going to be on vacation. I get multiple hours of strategic planning on the 29th, 30th, and 31st. And our guest host is going to be Keith Bryce, who's going to be in with a panel of local lenders. They could be talking about the local aspects if we're going through with the forgiveness aspect. And I believe I saw a poll a couple of weeks ago that 64% of you responded that you used a local lender for your PPP. Your local lender could very well be on this panel. And join next week, special guest host Keith Bryce, and for number 20 on July 29th, 2020. Okay, great. Let's get to some questions. I know there's a lot of questions that are usually out there. We usually don't have time to get through them all. Saved a little bit of time today. Hopefully your questions are going to be helpful. Have to go there generally to get to the question box, which it doesn't want to give me the question box. Questions, please. Okay, stop sharing the screen, and there's our questions. Okay, question number 1. And Jay, I'm going to give you the first crack at each of these questions. And I'll chime in and add a little bit more if needs to be. Our first question, Jay, is on the CARES Act. And ironically, this is something that you provided to me, and in the CARES Act that we haven't really talked about. There's a provision in there that actually allows individuals to borrow from their IRA. Now, the question is, if worst case situation where I don't want to use my retirement funds, if I need to, since I'm all in my business to potentially carry that forward, is borrowing from the CARES Act from my IRA a viable idea?
Well, it's an option, but when you start retirement accounts, typically you start those with a financial plan and a goal in mind. And if you take money out of that prematurely, you're going to ruin the end result. So if it's a absolute necessity to avoid bankruptcy or something that, some major disaster, I would say, yes, go ahead and do that. But also be mindful that you want to pay that back so that you stay back on track with your retirement goals.
Yeah, and the only thing I might add is that it's a individual case by case situation. You're going to want to look at, if you have a foreclosure on, say, an SBA loan that gets sucked into there, and maybe your home has been pledged for collateral based on the equity value of your collateral in your home and some of the other things. So it is a potentially a tool, although it, like Jay says, maybe a dull tool, but it is something as far as an option that might be available. But really, really give it a lot of thought and do check with your financial advisor. The next one is on forgiveness for self-employed individuals. And we've covered this a little bit in the past, Jay, but can I now take my full $20,833 for my salary?
Yes, you can. You're going to take that over a period of 2.5 months. But you can pay yourself with your PPP money. Yes.
Yes. You will need to elect the 24-week alternative period in order to do that, but yes, you can. Do you think the IRS's position on business expenses will be changed? And how will that impact my business? And let me just back that up a little bit with a little bit of, if you recall that the PPP loan, your business expenses actually cannot be deducted, and the value of your PPP loan is not considered income. So the IRS's position with their guidance has been, and this could be something that's negotiated in the stimulus package right now. There's not a lot of buzz on it. There was earlier about it not being the intent of Congress. So it could potentially be part of the package. But again, the PPP loan is not included in income, and the expenses that are used cannot be deducted on your taxes. So the question now is, how will that be implemented and how impactful would that be?
Well, really, it's kind of a wash because loans aren't taxable, but you repay them with taxable income normally. And so if you're not paying tax on that income, which you normally would, if a loan is forgiven, then it becomes taxable, right? And they're not taxing you on that end. So really, it's a wash. So if they taxed you for forgiving the loan and then you deducted the expenses, that would be one thing. But if they're not going to tax you on the loan forgiveness, then they shouldn't give you the tax deduction.
Any possibility of opening Kern's recovery loans for businesses that received a PPP? The website says that all 25 million now has been allocated. I think we touched on that briefly. Let me grab this one and you can fill in. You could backfill this answer. We did have Jim Zervis a couple of weeks ago on, and they did start accepting PPP loan recipients for those that were in industries that were hard hit. So that kind of pushed it to the $25 million threshold. I was on a call last week with County Supervisor Zach Scribner, and Supervisor Scribner mentioned that there is CARES money that could be reallocated and could be reallocated towards small businesses because it's such a priority of the county. Right now, they need to wait to see if they need to do something with an alternative medical site at the Kern County Fairgrounds, and if hospital beds become such a premium that they need to do something in that area. But if that doesn't happen, the Board of Supervisors could later this summer or fall look at allocating more money for either the Kern Recovers loan program or the PPE program. And Jay's going to say I covered that one okay. This is just a comment, but my EIDL application was accepted in 2 days and funded 2 days later. Thank you. To repeat the links for County of Kern, go to the County of Kern website and look at their COVID-19. I just Google generally Kern Recovers, and then I look for the county website and go there and get into it that way. There is a form that you fill out for the free PPE, and it takes a little bit of time to process. So do work on that, and they do supply you with a 2-week, generally a 2-week allocation based on the number of employees. They do allow the program up to employers with 200 employees. Also, if you're on the Eastern Sierra, you probably know this by now, but your local chambers of commerce are assisting with PPE in Inyo and Mono County, and to contact your local SBDC in other areas. Thank you, Kimberly, for the nice comment on delivering up-to-date information and suggesting a webinar on negotiations. I think that's a great idea. Negotiations is a very specialized area. Next question is going to be on the Kern Recovers program. And I think that since the loan program is out of funds now, we're just going to hold off and wait till we see if they get more actual program funds. Am I mistaken, or is there a max salary limit for owners versus employees making over 100,000? And I'll take this one, Jay. If they're an employee non-owner, and that's a LLC, corporation, limited partnership, etc., any business form, if they're an employee, a straight employee with no ownership in the organization, they can be paid over 46,000. However, if they have any type of ownership capabilities whatsoever, it is capped at 20,833. So they did with the third round of stimulus, which added more PPP and some more guidance, did do that for tomorrow. Provide a link for the Fresno SBA webinar. I could try to find it. It is kind of a difficult webinar to find at times, but if you Google the Fresno SBA district office, that's the Fresno district office for SBA, it should be right there. If you still have a problem, send me an email at kbearden@csub.edu. And that is for EIDL reconsideration tomorrow at 11 a.m. And if you need to have your EIDL reconsidered, it's a great opportunity to get some great expert advice. My EIDL was just extended, or it was just accepted. Jay, how do I extend my EIDL to last for the full 24 weeks?
How do you extend your EIDL to the?
Yeah, so that's I think there's a little mix up there with the PPP and the EIDL. You can extend your PPP for 24 weeks. The EIDL right now does not have a time deadline. It is an open-ended disaster loan based on how long this disaster lasts. Hopefully this disaster goes away soon, but it is open-ended as businesses need working capital to survive in their businesses. Is there a priority of funds that should be used first based on likelihood or forgiveness? We received a Kern County Recovers program and a PPP. Jay, they received both a Kern Recovers and a PPP.
Well, you want to follow the guidelines so that you receive the forgiveness to maximize that. So with the PPP, that 60% goes to wages, and the other 40% would go to business continuity expense. So I would suggest probably you look at paying your wages first on both of those, and then move to the business continuity expenses.
And do remember, you cannot double count your wages. You cannot take the same employee wages and count it against your Kern Recovers and your PPP. And the other thing is you're given more flexibility with your Kern Recovers. You're given a 1/3 of that for working capital. You're giving 1/3 of that for rent, mortgage interest, utilities, etc., and 1/3 for payroll. So you're going to want to make sure that you hit your payroll numbers on both of them, But on Kern Recovers, you only need to hit it for a third, so you have much more flexibility, whereas you need to hit the 60% threshold for the PPP. Okay, so next question. This individual works in Bakersfield and receives our emails, but their business is in LA County. If you live in Kern County, we can assist you with an LA County business. If not, you'll want to contact the Los Angeles SBDC region. Is it advisable to renegotiate the 5-year term on my PPP before I apply for forgiveness? So that 5-year term would be for the amounts that are not forgiven. I'm trying to understand your question, Nancy. Is it advisable to renegotiate the 5-year term on my PPP? Jay, can you help me on this? Before I apply for forgiveness. So I see your point now. I got you. So Nancy received a PPP before June 5th. And before June 5th, it was just a 2-year term. And Nancy is going to have amounts that are not forgiven. It could be your EIDL advance, and it could be other amounts. And you know, we talk so much about forgiveness here. There's some managerial strategies toward, you know, carrying money over, especially if you have a 5-year term at 1%, based on what your needs for your business are going to be. So potentially, if you did not get a EIDL loan, you haven't been able to bring your employees back. So what you can do is you could use the funds for working capital. You can use it to pay suppliers and other things that are generally not PPP forgiven. And then the 5-year term kicks in on that. I think it is advisable to negotiate a 5-year term with your bank or lender before you apply for forgiveness, or just talk to them about the likelihood of that happening. And again, all this could be a moot point because of the $150,000 offer on the table as part of the next round of stimulus to actually have every loan under $150,000 forgiven. Anything to add on that, Jay?
No, I think you got that covered.
Okay, just to clarify, we offered, I think we might have had a little conflicting answers when we were talking about the sole proprietor for the PPP. And you can take the entire amount of $20,833 if your earnings were $100,000 or net earnings were $100,000 or more. If it was less than that, then it was probably a lower amount. So when Jay, I think, was talking about taking the 2.5 months, if you recall, when you take your income to determine the amount of your PPP, you take you take basically 2.5 months. If you received your PPP after June 5th, you're required to actually use the period of 24 weeks. So sorry if we confused you, but 24 weeks, you can take it over a 24-week period, and you are actually, even though you might use the funds in less time than 24 weeks and apply for forgiveness after a shorter period of time, what you don't want to do is you don't want to run into that weekly maximum, of which I think we had around $1,900. So being able to take it, and actually that would give you, if you take the 24 weeks and you actually take, we'd have to go back to our spreadsheet and look at that, but it was like $1,900 a week. That would give you the $46,000 for an employee non-owner that you could take. But since you're a sole proprietor, you can take it all. I just recommend doing it over a period of time that is consistent, and you document it well by paying yourself a paycheck a draw or something, saying what it was for, and having all that information ready when you seek forgiveness. Yay. I think that's about it for today. Hey, we only ran 5 minutes over. Well, thank you all for attending today. I'd like to thank our special guest, Jay Thompson. And if you sign up for SBDC services, you can get some of Jay's wonderful expertise at the most remarkable price of all time, being free. And SBDC consultants are still working around the clock with clients. We'll be back next week on week 20. Our special guest host will be Keith Bryce. We'll have local lenders. I will see you again back on the 5th of August. So everyone, have a great week. Happy business, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye, everyone.